Ethan Cole sat in the quiet control room of his small medical ship called Aurora. The stars outside drifted slowly past the glass, silent witnesses to his long hours alone. He had been traveling through deep space for months, moving from one remote colony to another, helping those in need. Some called him a hero. He did not think of himself that way. He only knew that, wherever there were sick or wounded people, he wanted to be there to help. It was late when the message came. The sound of the emergency signal broke the stillness of the cabin. Ethan straightened quickly, eyes narrowing at the glowing screen in front of him. The transmission came from a world not far below his current flight path. The message was short but filled with emotion. A woman's voice spoke, soft but trembling with fear. "Please, our daughter is dying. She has an illness we cannot understand. We will give you anything if you can save her. Please help us." Then the message ended, leaving only silence and the heartbeat-like pulse of the ship's machinery. Ethan listened to the recording 3 times before standing up and making his decision. It did not matter who these people were or how far they lived from any known city. A child's life was in danger, and that was enough for him to act. He adjusted the ship's course and began the descent toward the planet called Vardell. As the clouds parted beneath him, he saw wide plains, shining rivers, and tall mountains rising in the distance. But what caught his eye most was a walled city built of stone and silver, surrounded by fields that glimmered like mirrors under the morning sun. When Aurora touched down on a soft patch of grass outside the walls, several figures hurried toward him. They were dressed in fine robes, and yet their faces showed the same human expressions he had seen everywhere in the galaxy: fear, hope, and exhaustion. One man stepped forward, tall and serious, his brown eyes watching Ethan carefully. "You are Dr. Cole," the man said in a deep voice. "Yes," Ethan replied. He looked past the man and saw a woman following him. She walked with calm dignity, but her hands shook slightly as she clutched the folds of her robe. Her eyes were red from sleepless nights. "I am Queen Amelia," she said softly. "This is my husband, King Elias. We have called you because our only daughter, Lucia, lies close to death. She is just 17. All the healers of our land have failed. You are our last hope." Ethan felt a shiver run down his spine. A queen and king, living like ancient royalty here on a hidden planet. It was strange, almost impossible, yet the fear and love in their eyes were real. He nodded, picking up his medical case. "Take me to her," he said. The palace was large and beautiful, built of bright marble that glowed faintly in the morning light. Long halls lined with carved pillars led him toward a quiet chamber at the far end. There, in a bed of white cloth, lay a young girl. Her face was pale, and her breathing came in short, painful gasps. Queen Amelia moved to the girl's side and touched her forehead gently. "Lucia," she whispered, "the doctor has come." Lucia's eyes opened slightly, cloudy and weak. Awful. She looked at Ethan and smiled just a little. "You came from the stars," she said in a faint voice. "Then maybe you can help me see them again." Ethan's heart tightened in his chest. He did not answer. Instead, he began his examination carefully, checking her pulse, her temperature, and the strange marks that covered her arms. There were faint lines glowing beneath her skin, as if her blood itself carried light. He looked at the queen and king. "When did this start?" 4 days ago, the king said quietly. "She touched something in the crystal caverns north of the city. She said it was beautiful, and then she fainted. Since then, the fever has grown worse." Ethan listened while studying the glowing lines. He had seen many unusual illnesses, but never one quite like this. Whatever had entered her blood was unlike any infection he knew. He set up a small scanner from his medical bag. The device hummed softly as it analyzed her vital signs. Numbers flickered on his screen, erratic, dangerous. "She's very weak," Ethan said finally, his voice low. "But it is not too late. I will do all I can." Queen Amelia's eyes filled with tears. "Dr. Cole," she said, her voice breaking, "if you save her, we will give you anything you ask for. Anything." Ethan looked at her, then at the pale girl whose fragile breath rose and fell beneath the thin sheets. "You owe me nothing," he said simply. "I only want her to live." The queen bowed her head, whispering words of thanks as Ethan prepared his instruments. Outside the chamber window, The twin suns of Vardell rose higher, casting golden light through the curtains. The soft beams touched the girl's face as Ethan began his work, steady and calm. He did not yet know what mystery had struck this young princess or how deep its roots went, but he swore silently that he would not fail. Somewhere beneath those glowing lines in her veins lay the answer, and he would find it, no matter what it cost. Ethan worked through the night beside the sick girl's bed. The palace outside was silent, and the only sound in the room was the slow, weak rhythm of Lucia's breathing. Small lamps burned with a yellow glow, casting soft light on the polished stone walls. The queen stayed near her daughter, never sitting for long, and the king paced the floor in anxious silence. Ethan had seen many illnesses in his life, but nothing like this one. The strange lines on Lucia's skin glimmered softly each time she breathed. He studied the readings from his device, but the data made no sense. Her body was fighting itself, as if some sleeping part of her blood had awakened and turned against her. He set up a small table beside the bed and started to mix a few of the compounds he had brought from his ship. He needed something that could calm her fever and give her body time to recover. The herbs and crystal powders from the royal healers were laid out for him to examine. Their smells were sharp and earthy, different from any medicine he had known. He crushed a few together, testing how they reacted to the medical fluids from his kit. The queen stepped forward. "Will this help her?" Ethan looked up. Her voice trembled with quiet hope. "I think it will bring her some strength," he said. "But to cure her completely, I must understand what is happening in her blood. That will take time." She nodded and clasped her hands tightly. "You will have anything you need." By the time the twin moons had set beyond the hills, Lucia's breathing had become steady again. The queen allowed herself to rest at last, holding her daughter's hand while seated in a large chair near the bed. Ethan watched them for a moment. The sight stirred something deep in him, a memory of his own mother who had waited by his side through a long illness when he was a child. He turned back to his instruments. The small scanner gave him new results that puzzled him further. Inside Lucia's cells, he saw shapes that looked almost like codes, as if her body had patterns written within it. He could not tell if they were natural or made long ago. It felt as though the illness had struck an ancient part of humanity's past that had been sleeping until now. At dawn, the king entered the room, dressed in plain clothes. His crown was gone, and he looked more like a weary father than a ruler. "Dr. Cole," he said quietly, "you have done more than all our healers. My wife says the color has returned to Lucia's face." Ethan nodded slowly. "She is stable for now. But the sickness is deeper than I thought. What is something I've never seen before?" The king sighed and sat near the window. The sky outside was a bright silver dawn. "This world keeps many secrets," he said. "Our fathers came here long ago from distant lands. We do not speak of those days." "There is history in your daughter's blood," Ethan replied. "I can feel it. If I understand it, I can save her." The king looked troubled. "Then you must know the truth one day." "But not yet. Save her first." Ethan worked for the next few days without rest. He tested small doses of medicine, watched her pulse, recorded her energy readings, and slept only when his eyes could no longer stay open. The queen often brought him food, though he forgot to eat most of it. The palace servants moved quietly, whispering stories of the man from the stars who might heal the princess. Sometimes, when Lucia drifted halfway between sleep and waking, she spoke softly. "I saw light in the caves," she murmured one evening, her hand barely moving. "It called to me. It was beautiful and warm." "What did it look like?" Ethan asked gently. "Like a river of fire under glass," she whispered. "When I touched it, it was not cold or hot. It felt alive." Then she fell asleep again, her words sinking into his mind. A living light beneath the ground. He knew then he would have to visit those caverns. He needed to see what she had touched. One morning, before the suns had risen, Ethan left the palace with a small local guide named Lucas. They rode small ground gliders across the misty plains toward the crystal caverns. The air smelled of dew and wildflowers. When they reached the entrance, Ethan was struck by the beauty of the place. The walls shimmered softly even before sunrise, and each crystal inside glowed faintly, humming with quiet energy. He felt the same warmth Lucia had described, deep in his skin, as though the light itself recognized him. He took a small sample from the walls. The glow faded the moment he touched it with his tools. It reminded him of the lights under Lucia's skin. Somehow, what she had touched had entered her body and stayed alive within her blood. Back at the palace, he studied the sample and compared it with Lucia's readings. The results made his heart pound. The pattern was the same. The crystal and her blood shared one thing in common: a strange energy that responded only to human DNA. That night, as he looked down at Lucia, sleeping peacefully for the first time, he knew the truth. This planet was not only her home, it was trying to speak through her. He did not yet understand why, but he promised himself that before this was over, he would learn its secret and use it to bring her fully back to life. Ethan did not sleep for almost 2 days. He worked in silence, studying every sample he had brought from the shining caves. The small laboratory he had built inside the palace chamber smelled of clean metal and burning circuits. The glow from his scanners reflected across his tired face as he compared Lucia's blood with the crystal dust from the cave. Each time he looked, he was more certain both carried the same pattern of light. When he rubbed his eyes and stepped away from the table, the king entered quietly. King Elias looked calmer now, though there were still dark lines under his eyes. "You have found something," the king said, guessing from Ethan's expression. "Yes," Ethan answered. "It is strange. The crystals and Lucia's blood share the same code. It is as if they were made for each other. When she touched them, something inside her woke up." The king frowned. "Made for each other. But how could that be possible?" "I don't know yet," Ethan said. "But it feels like this was meant to happen long ago. Maybe your ancestors changed their blood to match this world. Maybe time forgot why." Queen Amelia entered then, her pale arms wrapped in a soft shawl. "Tell me only one thing," she said quietly. "Can she be cured?" Ethan hesitated for the first time. "If I can learn how her body connects to the energy inside those crystals, yes. But to do that, I must try something risky." The queen looked frightened, but she nodded. "Whatever must be done, do it. Just bring her back to life." He returned to his table and prepared a solution made from a mix of distilled cave crystal and Lucia's own antibodies. The idea was simple. If the energy was rejecting her body, he would teach it to recognize her again, just as a body learns to heal from a cut.
Ow.
It was dangerous, and if the balance was wrong, it could destroy her entirely. When he injected the first dose, every lamp in the room flickered. The air grew warm, and a soft vibration ran through the palace stones. Lucia gasped and opened her eyes wide. For a moment, her whole body shimmered with faint light. The queen cried out and ran to her side, but Ethan raised a hand sharply. "Let it settle." Lucia's breathing slowed, then calmed again. The glowing lines on her skin faded to a gentle warmth, no longer burning bright. She fell asleep almost peacefully. Ethan checked her pulse, strong and steady. He allowed himself the smallest smile. Later that evening, he stepped outside for the first time in days. The night air felt cold on his face. The royal gardens stretched out before him, full of tall silver flowers that opened only in the dark. He looked up at the sky. The twin moons shimmered side by side, shining on the distant mountains where the caves slept beneath the ground. He thought of everything he had learned since coming here. Forgotten world. A royal family that still carried the code of their ancestors. A sickness that was really a signal from the planet itself. Humanity had always adapted to survive, even when time and space tried to divide it. He turned when he heard a soft voice behind him. It was Queen Amelia. "Dr. Cole," she said, "I have seen many healers over the years, but none with your heart. My husband and I owe you more than words can say." Ethan shook his head. "It is not over yet, Your Majesty. She is safe for now, but I must understand why this happened, or it could happen again to her or to others." The queen looked toward the moons. "Perhaps the planet remembers things we do not. Our people came here many generations ago before my great-grandfather's time. The stories say our ancestors changed themselves to endure the air and light of this land. That would explain the patterns in her blood," Ethan said softly. "It's an old design, and time has started to break it down." The crystals only woke it up. The queen's eyes grew distant. "You speak like a historian as well as a doctor," he smiled faintly. "Maybe healing and history are not so far apart. Both are about remembering what once made us whole." That night, Ethan returned to his workbench. He arranged the samples in order and began mapping the codes one by one. Each spark of data revealed a little more about the ancient program inside Lucia's cells. It was not just random energy, it was a message written in human form. It seemed to whisper, asterisk, we survive by change. Asterisk. When dawn rose again, Lucia opened her eyes fully for the first time since he had arrived. Her voice was faint but clear. Dr. Cole, she said, I dreamed of the light. It was inside me, and it was not angry anymore. Ethan leaned close. That means you are healing, Lucia. The light has accepted you again. Tears filled her mother's eyes, but this time they were tears of relief, not fear. King Elias stood near the door, watching them with quiet pride. Name your reward, Doctor. Whatever you wish, gold, land, carriages, a title in our kingdom. You have saved our daughter. Ethan smiled tiredly. Your thanks is enough for me. But promise me this, teach your people what you have seen. Don't hide from the truth of who you are. You come from strong roots. Don't let them be forgotten again. The king and queen nodded. For the first time in many days, the palace felt alive again. Servants whispered happy news through the halls, and the city bells rang softly from the towers. Ethan watched the light stream through the windows. Deep inside, he knew there was still more to uncover about this strange connection between the people of this world and the globe beneath its surface. But for the moment, peace had returned. Lucia's smile alone made the endless nights worth every second. Ethan woke early that morning. The sun outside the palace had just started to rise over the long silver hills. The light poured into his small room, touching the tables covered with notes, test tubes, and his scanner. He had barely slept, but his mind was clear. Lucia was improving, and her color had returned. Still, a deep question stayed in his heart. Why did the light of the crystals react only to her blood and no one else's? When he walked into the royal chamber, Queen Amelia and King Elias were already there. They were speaking in low voices, as though the walls themselves might listen. Lucia sat on the edge of her bed, weak but smiling. Good morning, Dr. Cole, she said softly. Good morning, Lucia, he replied, with a gentle smile. You look stronger today. I feel stronger, she said. Though I still dream about the light sometimes. Ethan sat beside her bed and checked her vitals. The light is part of you now, he explained, but it is calm. It no longer hurts you. The queen placed her hand on her daughter's shoulder. We cannot thank you enough, Doctor. You gave us hope when we had none. Ethan shook his head. Hope was always here. You just needed to see it again. Later that day, the palace opened the great dining hall to everyone who had helped during Lucia's illness. Servants brought food and fruit from the gardens, and music floated through the air. It was a celebration not only for Lucia's recovery, but also for the return of peace after long weeks of fear. Ethan stood near one of the tall windows, watching the sky beyond the city walls. The smell of roasted grain and sweet juice filled the air. For once, he allowed himself to relax. The king walked over to him, holding 2 cups of warm tea. You look thoughtful, Ely said with a grin. I had hoped to see you smile more on this happy day. Ethan took the cup. I am happy, Your Majesty. Your daughter is safe. But there is something about this planet and your people that I still don't fully understand. The king's smile faded slightly. He studied the horizon. He spoke before about the code inside our blood, he said quietly. I believe it is time you know the truth. Ethan turned toward him, listening closely. When our ancestors came to this world, Elias said, they did not come freely. They were survivors of a dying colony. They carried with them the knowledge to rewrite their own bodies. They changed their cells to match the energy of this world's light so they could breathe the air and drink the water. Over time, we forgot the full science behind it, but the trace of it remained in our blood. Ethan was silent for a long moment. Then he nodded slowly. That explains everything. The crystals in the caverns are part of the same design. They recognized that ancient code. Lucia's illness was that code trying to repair itself. The king looked at him, hope glimmering in his dark eyes. So you believe she is truly safe now? Yes, Ethan said. But this knowledge is powerful. You must protect it and learn from it. If understood well, it could help your people live longer, grow stronger, maybe even heal others. Not long after, the people of the city gathered in the grand courtyard. The sound of cheers filled the air when Lucia appeared with her parents, standing proudly in the sunlight. Her hair shone like copper, her cheeks full of life once more. Ethan stood at the edge of the crowd, feeling a quiet joy. When it was his turn to approach, the king raised his voice for all to hear. "This man saved our daughter and restored faith to our people. He asked for no gold, no title, no reward. But we will nevertheless honor him as a friend of the kingdom forever." The crowd clapped and cheered again. Ethan bowed slightly, his face warm with embarrassment. "Thank you," he said. "But true honor is to see her well again. That is enough for me." That evening, as the city glowed with firelights and laughter, Ethan returned to the gardens. The queen found him standing near a fountain, looking at the reflection of the moons in the water. "You could stay here, Doctor," she said kindly. "We would be proud to have you as part of our family. You could teach our healers, share your knowledge." Ethan looked at the gentle ripples in the water. "It would be easy to stay," he said softly. "But my duty is to go where I am needed. This world has its future now. There will be others who need help." Queen Amelia lowered her eyes, but nodded with understanding. "At least promise you will one day return to see how we have grown?" "I promise," he said, and meant it. Lucia joined them then, walking slowly with a bright shawl wrapped around her shoulders. She smiled at him. "I hope you do come back," she said. "I want to show you the new school the king is planning. He says we will teach medicine there, your kind and ours together." Ethan felt warmth spread through him. "That would be the greatest gift you could give this world," he said. When the stars rose that night, Ethan stood by his ship and looked one last time at the glowing city. The bells in the towers rang softly, carrying through the cool air. Behind him, the voice of the queen floated faintly. "May our paths meet again, Dr. Cole?" He waved once, smiling. The ship's lights came on, humming gently as it prepared for takeoff. As it lifted above the city, he watched the lights below grow smaller, until they were only a dim sea of silver sparkles. He thought of what the king had told him, of humanity changing itself to survive. Each world he had visited, each person he had met, told the same story in different ways. The story of survival, courage, and hope. Ethan leaned back in his seat as the ship glided through the quiet of space. He closed his eyes, feeling a calm he had not known in years. Somewhere below, a young girl named Lucia looked up at the same stars and whispered a silent thank you. And for the first time in a long journey, Ethan felt that his work, even in a vast and endless universe, truly mattered. Ethan sat in the quiet cabin of his ship as it drifted through open space. The stars outside looked still, but he knew they were burning and moving faster than imagination could measure. He had been traveling for several days since leaving the world of Vardell. His thoughts stayed there, circling around the faces of the people he had left behind. He could still see Lucia smiling, full of life. He could still hear Queen Amelia's soft words and King Elias's steady voice. Their hope had reminded him why he had chosen this life. On the table beside him lay a small crystal from the caves. The king had given it to him as a gift before he left. It no longer glowed like the ones he had seen underground, but when he held it in his palm, a faint warmth passed through his skin. It was silent, yet alive in its way. Ethan smiled. It was a reminder that humanity carried more than history within its blood. It carried the power to begin again wherever it went. He looked up at the window where the deep blue of space faded into the shimmer of distant suns. Next. Somewhere out there were other lost colonies, other forgotten stories waiting to be found. He had promised the queen he would return one day. He would keep that promise, but first he had work to do. Some hours later, he received a transmission. The screen blinked with a slow pulse before a shaky voice spoke. "Dr. Cole, this is Captain Lewis from Station Haven. We have an outbreak spreading across the lower decks. Our medics cannot contain it. We request your help." Ethan felt a familiar weight settle on his shoulders. Another call for help, another life in danger. He touched the small crystal again, feeling its faint pulse. "Send me your coordinates," he replied simply. As his ship changed course, he thought of Lucia's recovery. The illness she had faced was not truly a curse, but a message hidden in her blood. It had taught him that the cure for most things begins with understanding. He wondered how many others across different worlds might carry pieces of forgotten knowledge in their bodies waiting to awaken. Days passed as he moved toward Station Haven. Each night he recorded his notes about Vardell. He did not want their story lost to time. He described how the people had once changed themselves to survive, how their blood remembered, and how a young girl's strength had saved not only her own life, but the future of her people. When he finally reached the station, the place was silent. The large dome lights flickered faintly, and the air smelled of smoke and metal. Ethan walked through narrow halls filled with quiet fear. The illness there was strange but not completely unfamiliar. The symptoms reminded him of Lucia's early signs: weak pulse, faint light behind the veins. He set up a small lab inside an empty medical ward. He scanned the samples from the patients and stared at the readings with surprise. The same energy signature was there, though weaker. It seemed that the genetic changes humans made long ago had spread farther than anyone realized. Somehow, those who came to Vardell were not the only ones who carried it. As he worked, memories from his time in the palace returned to him: the long nights, the queen's tears, the child fighting to breathe. It gave him strength. He mixed small doses of the formula he had used before, adjusting it to match these new patients. Within hours, the first signs of recovery began to show. The lights in their veins softened and faded, and peaceful sleep returned to them. When Captain Lewis entered the room, his eyes widened. "You did it again, Doctor," he said in disbelief. "Whatever this is, you saved them." Ethan only smiled faintly. "It was never only me. This cure began long before any of us were born. Humanity has always found a way to survive. Just needed to remember what we once were." The captain thanked him and left, but Ethan remained seated by the sleeping patients. He watched the soft rise and fall of their breathing and felt a quiet satisfaction. Somewhere deep inside, he felt that humanity was rediscovering something ancient, a power that came not from force or machines, but from knowledge and compassion. That night, as the station lights dimmed, he took the crystal out once more. The faint energy shimmered again, little pulses of light moving gently like a heartbeat. He knew he should send a report to the medical board on Earth, sharing what he had learned about Vardell's people and their genetic gift. But part of him hesitated. Perhaps some secrets were meant to be treated with care, not used by those who sought only power. He decided he would guard the knowledge until people were ready to use it wisely. In his logbook, he wrote only this: "Life adapts. Where there is light, life learns to grow again." In the quiet space of the ship, he closed the book, looked through the window, and saw 1,000 stars, scattered like sparks on an endless dark sea. He thought of Queen Amelia, teaching her people, of Lucia studying medicine, and of the kingdom building new homes filled with light. Ethan smiled. The universe was wide, but every act of kindness, every life saved, linked one world to another. Humanity, he thought, might never lose its way completely, as long as someone kept listening to the call of the light. He set his course ahead and let the stars guide him. Somewhere deep in the quiet, the crystal on his desk glowed softly once more, as if reminding him that even across great distances, hope still reached out and lived on.